Welcome to Postcards from Palisade, the podcast about the people and places that make our slice of Western Colorado wonderful. I'm Lisa McNamara. So we already have one national monument nearby. What if we had another? Today I'm talking with Bella Harris of the Colorado Wildlands Project. The Colorado Wildlands Project works to protect wild public lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management. One of their major goals is creating a national monument in the Dolores River Canyon country. Bella, who's based in Palisade, is a wildlands campaigner. Bella explains to me why a national monument is so important, not only to protect the natural environment, but also to preserve and honor the layers of human history found in the area, from the ancestral homelands of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe to the more recent work sites of the miners whose sacrifices contributed to the Manhattan Project. Yes, that Manhattan Project. Bella explains the difference between the proposed National Conservation Area, currently moving through the bureaucracy of DC, and the national monument that her organization is advocating for, and why these ideas actually have bipartisan support, when so little does today. We chat about the most effective ways to change bad outdoors behavior, why no one with water allotments needs to be worried about losing water, at least not because of the monument, and why she's not concerned at all about a monument designation, quote-unquote, ruining the area. Also, listen closely to find out which local winery is extra invested in the effort to protect the Dolores, how you can help, and lots more. Let's take a late fall road trip to the Dolores River Canyon country on today's postcard from Palisade. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I was really excited to talk to you, and this is, well, let's talk about who you are first. So if you could introduce yourself and...
Yeah, so my name is Bella Harris. My role is the Wildlands campaigner at the Colorado Wildlands Project. We're a very small nonprofit here based in Grand Junction. It's me and two other employees. And overall, our organization works to advocate for and protect wilderness quality and wild public lands that are based in Western Colorado.
How did you get into doing this?
I'm actually really happy that's your first question. I was in college back in Fort Collins. I was actually getting my PhD in environmental communications and science communications. I decided that I didn't want to be going down the academic route anymore. And so I dropped out of school and I quit my job and I moved back home. I'm from Grand Junction originally. And so I moved back home here and started working at a local children's museum here in town, just kind of doing front desk management stuff. And one day my high school social studies teacher came in and we recognized each other. And I told him, I said, you know, this museum is great, but I would really prefer to be using my master's degree in a job that's a little bit more fulfilling than this. And he said, well, I don't know what you've seen, but my best friend from like back in my 20s is hiring for a community organizer in environmental advocacy. You may want to look into it.
So funny.
And I looked it up, and that day that he told me was the day that the application for the job closed. And so I took the rest of the day to write up an application, and I got it. And so I bring him lots of treats for his family as often as I can because I'm very thankful to him for getting me set up with this job, but that's how I found it.
That is so awesome. I mean, because there aren't probably a ton of jobs in that field here in this area. It's not a huge area, and then...
Yeah, you know, Grand Junction's really been changing, at least from when I graduated high school here back in 2014. Back then, there was nothing. It was a lot of oil and gas jobs around. Just the economy was a lot more towards that spectrum. And honestly, since I left and came back, it's incredible how fast the Grand Junction / Palisade, Fruita, just the Grand Valley community has changed as a whole. It is much more environmentally focused now. at least from what I see from where it used to be. I mean, I go by Trail Life Brewing in Grand Junction or the Palisade Brewing here in town, and I see so many people that are mountain bikers, climbers, skiers there, people that are recreating in the outdoors all the time. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities for environmental jobs here. I think when I had first come back, a lot of these jobs ebb and flow with the season.
Yeah.
There's definitely more available at warmer times of the year than there are colder times of the year, and that's just the nature of we're outside a lot of the time.
Right.
So I think that was my biggest issue there, but there's a lot of incredible organizations here in town that are doing really similar work to us.
So the Colorado Wildlands Project, what are your main goals, or what are the kind of main priorities that you're working on?
So our mission really is to protect wild public lands managed by the BLM in Western Colorado. So that's, wilderness quality public lands that are protected by wilderness designations or wilderness study areas, or not protected. There's many acres of land that are wilderness quality that are not protected. We use a couple different ways to define that. There really isn't a clear definition of wilderness lands, but an absence of like a certain percentage of roads, like below a certain percentage of roads, not a lot of housing development, difficult to get to, maybe having to backpack into some of these lands. It's just, having really, really rich ecosystems for rare plants and wildlife. All of these are things that can conglomerate together to define wilderness. So that's what we focus on those lands that are managed by the BLM. We work in a couple different ways. We work in political advocacy for these lands, as well as getting new protections, long-term permanent protections designated on these lands.
Because for somebody who isn't really familiar with the many complicated layers of land management and land protection, for just the person on the street, they might say, oh, well, it's Bureau of Land Management land. It's protected already.
Yeah.
But if you have ever been to some BLM land, you know that basically anything goes.
Yes.
So it's set aside in how would you describe the level of protection it has compared to what you would want it to have?
And so I'll just bring up for example, because this is what I'm hoping to talk about the most, is the Dolores River Canyon country that is surrounding the Dolores River. And so I'll just bring up that area of BLM land, for example. There are small designated wilderness study areas throughout the Dolores landscape. They sort of go along the river, but they're sporadic. They're not connected. And they only, again, protect little segments along the river, not really doing a lot to protect the river and the surrounding desert landscape as a whole. And so, yes, those are great. They keep future oil and gas leasing from being able to be developed on those lands, as well as keeping more aggressive forms of maybe off-road recreation off those lands. And it's some really good longer-term protections. But on the other parts of that landscape in the Dolores, there is active mining operations, oil and gas leasing. And if you drive through it, you will see a lot of disruption on the landscape from those operations. Yeah. And so that is something one of our other employees, his name is Soren Jesperson. He lives in Steamboat Springs. He's our field director, and his main goal is to actually be physically getting through this landscape and documenting some of this damage on some of these lands that don't have protection yet, so that we can use real evidence, and pictures and testimonies to be able to advocate for them. And I think that's a really special, difficult job that he has, but he does a great job at it.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I've been over in that area and just exploring that area, and it's hard to get to. It's incredibly beautiful. It's disconnected from a lot of different, major cities. It's mostly off dirt roads. It's easy for people not to ever have known that it's there or to forget about it.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I was really surprised to see in that area is that there's a lot of uranium mines and things like that, which is
interesting.
What
I think is something really special about the Dolores is not only is it an incredibly rich landscape and biodiversity, but there's a whole other value to the Dolores, and that's its different layers of history. Mm-hmm. It is the ancestral land of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, and so that's a huge part of the history there. You can go through, if you know where to look, you can find petroglyphs, hieroglyphs throughout the whole area. It's really, really rich in that indigenous history. But there's also a very rich and important history in uranium mining in that area. And I think that's something that, in addition to all the other values of the Dolores, needs to be protected. There are many families and bloodlines of people in Natarita, near Gateway, Nukla, that have a very important history where their, grandparents, great-grandparents helped move the U.S. forward in our history, and whether you want to look at this as a good thing or a bad thing, but in our efforts in the Cold War and in World War II. The Manhattan Project was almost solely supplied by uranium that came from the Dolores. I think that that's one of the biggest, I don't want to say complaints, but questions that I get when I talk about our efforts to create a new national monument in this area. Is people are automatically assuming that we want to erase that history and try to say, no, we don't want mining here at all. We just want it to have this natural beauty, and that's not the case. We do have plans put in place to have interpretive messaging highlighting this history. Again, there's the scenic beauty, but then these different types of human history that are present in the area. We really want to preserve that and honor that.
I saw last spring, I think it was last spring, there was actually a bill introduced, and it was bipartisan support from our Colorado lawmakers to create, is it a national or natural conservation area?
National conservation area.
Okay. So how is that different from a national monument? And what would the path be to create something like a national monument instead of a national conservation area?
Yeah, so what we say is that we love the idea of this NCA being produced. So this NCA is proposed on the area of the Dolores. It's actually more so near the town of Dolores, near Montezuma County, actually Dolores County.
That's only a little piece of the river.
Exactly. So, and that's what's been proposed as the National Conservation Area right now.
Interesting.
And that is, again, a National Conservation Area is a very long-term, very durable protection plan for that area. But as you just stated, it only looks at a very small portion of the river. And again, what we're proposing is that we want more of the river to be protected than just that small area. Overall, the Colorado Wildlands Project, as well as our coalition of other conservationists, organizations, and stakeholders, are coming together and asking for solutions that protect the entirety of the Lower Dolores River Canyon country from the McPhee Dam in southwest Colorado to the Utah state line. And that includes lands in Montrose and Mesa counties, so that's all the land of the Dolores that's near us, such as Slick Rock Canyon and the Hanging Flume confluence area and all the areas near Gateway. So that's why we wanted to propose a national monument, because really the main reason is that a national monument is able to encompass more acreage than other protection plans would. And we hope to get as much of the canyon lands surrounding the river. I like to say that because it really kind of is a buffer around the river as much as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to see that it had bipartisan support, because almost nothing does now.
I know.
So
yeah.
why do you think that is?
I think that protecting land surrounding the Dolores River checks off a lot of boxes for a lot of people's and a lot of political interests. So a lot of individual interests, a lot of political interests. It helps recreators be able to protect the land that they want to recreate on. It ensures that, like us as environmental groups, that we have protected wildlands and we have protected habitat. But a lot of times it also makes sure that water is staying in the area and that can benefit agricultural landscapes. And when you are protecting a river system like that, it really benefits a lot of different stakeholder interests. And I was really happy to see that several people, including Bennett and Hickenlooper, both are very supportive of that national conservation area. That's really great to hear.
Yeah. One of the articles that I read in the Colorado Sun from last spring also talked about a survey that had been done of voters in the area.
Yeah.
Where
At Colorado College.
Yeah, over 75% of the people they surveyed were supportive of a national monument in the area.
Yeah.
Which, again, if you were to ask me just kind of my gut feel, I never would have guessed that. So it's really interesting to see that this does seem to be something that everybody kind of can come around and support.
And something too, I just want to say about that survey, 90% of people in that survey said that they wanted some form of permanent protection on the Dolores. So even in higher percent were in support of something of a protective effort.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, it's like, okay, everybody's behind it. The local people want it. What does it take to just make it happen?
A lot of these designations that are put in by the BLM, Wilderness Study Areas or that National Conservation Area, are done through the Senate. However, when you're looking at a national monument can only be designated presidentially. It takes whoever is president at the time to sign off and say that they declare an area a national monument. And so what our goal is, and I say us, and I'm referring to the Wildlands Project, but I'm also referring to the coalition as a whole. We're in a coalition of several other nonprofits across Colorado working together towards this effort. And we want to create a sense of political inevitability, where if it's President Biden, whoever is president after him, feels like it's the obvious choice to do this because they're hearing about it over and over and over again, and because so many people are saying, we need this land to be protected, that is just at the forefront of their mind. So again, it's that inevitability that we're hoping to be creating.
So how do you do that? How do you keep that in front of people and make them not forget about it? Or going on the local
so
podcasts?
I think that there's two separate parts to that, right? There's grassroots organizing, which is a lot of what I do, and that's educating the public on, and I don't like to say educating the public on like the Dolores and why it's important. I more so like to frame it as though I like to encourage people to see how their own lives and their own livelihoods are connected to this landscape and help them discover that for themselves. It doesn't work if I just go up to you and say, you should like blah, blah, blah river because it's important. And then I say, okay, sign this.
Right.
That's not, I wouldn't want that, And so something that I've learned over the years is I think that I've succeeded in my goal of organizing in grassroots communities by, again, helping people develop that personal relationship. And even if that takes time, sometimes that's not done in one visit that they have with me at a tabling event. It's them thinking, okay, well, this is my job in this valley. How is that connected to what's going on there? This is my family history in this area. How is that connected to these efforts that are going on there? And if they can think about that more, I have had success, and luckily I am able to show many, many people across the Grand Valley pretty quickly how their lives are connected to the Dolores. But I think a bigger part of that too is trying to help people, families, find accessible ways to get out there. A lot of people think that you can only get on the Dolores by boating it. And that's not true. There's a lot of easy hikes. There's a lot of difficult hikes. There are incredible views you can get by stepping 50 feet out of your car. And it's an hour away from Grand Junction. I say I'm mainly referring to Gateway. That's a really good kind of starting point to get to a lot of areas. Great accessible camping.
Yeah.
And I want people to know that they don't have to be a world-class rafter to be able to get out there, or an intense backpacker to be able to get out there. So, but then the other part of that, my boss, our director, Scott Braden, what he focuses on more is the opposite of that grassroots effort, which is the grass tops efforts. So a lot more of his work is talking to very influential people in our community, whether that's politicians, influential business owners, or leaders of other groups, organizations, coalitions that have a lot of say-so within the Grand Valley, and working with them to try to gain support, and if the support is not there, to try to find some middle ground. So, he's the one that's going out to Denver to talk to our elected officials out there, and over to DC to talk to our elected officials out there. And it's two very different types of organizing. And I feel like, I always like to say that Scott and I really complement each other well. We have very different skill sets that complement each other, but that work really well in those two separate areas of organizing. And there's definitely overlap there. We just had a screening last night. There was a film that was made sort of talking about this effort to create permanent protections on the Dolores. It's called The River of Sorrows. And we did have a touring of the film a couple months ago, but this one was a little bit later in the season. We had it at the university, at Colorado Mesa University, and I thought that was a really cool sort of overlap between our efforts to try to gain public support, because from my end, I had several students and teachers there who I've been working with for the students to problem solve and create their own solutions for challenges in the area. And I was so happy that a ton of them came. But at the same time, we had the mayor of Grand Junction there to speak. Anna Stout was there. And it was a very good mingling of grassroots and grass tops efforts of a bunch of people that have fallen in love with this landscape.
There's an older movie, River of Sorrow, that's out, that's kind of similar, but maybe 8-10 years old or so?
I think made back in 2016.
16, okay.
So I believe, yes, they were both made by the same company, by Cody Perry. He is an incredible, charismatic, fun-loving advocate for the Dolores. He's an amazing filmmaker. Just being able to talk to him is a treat, really. He's so passionate, and he's so, I'm just going to repeat it again, he is the definition of charisma.
That's awesome.
And is a really great, honestly, spokesperson for our efforts. And so he's the filmmaker for both of those. Incredibly kind person. He and his wife works at the Dolores River Boating Advocates, and who is another very big player in our coalition efforts. And they both live down in Dolores. The film is incredible. The River of Sorrows. It's made me cry time and time again. Especially the interviews he's able to get, and some of the people that he has speaking in it come with the most incredible stories and the most amazing backgrounds. But at the same time, I really want people to remember that, the film follows two pack rafters, people that are trying to boat the Dolores when it is at 7, single digit 7 CFS. And that there is a whole canyon country surrounding that river to explore. And that even if the river's not flowing, there is so much beauty beyond the river. And I hope that people take the time to go out there, even if they can't access the river, or if it's not flowing.
That's a really good point. Yeah. That you don't want people to get too focused on just the river to the exclusion of everything else that there is around there. Yeah, good point. It's really hard not to talk about water, though, and water in the West and water rights and everything. And I think a lot of people, when they hear about preserving an area, they worry about what they're going to lose. So in this situation, though, it seems like, well, and now correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I've read, it seems like the water kind of allotments and allocations that are already in place, those can't be touched. Those aren't going anywhere.
So you're completely right. It doesn't matter what kind of protections we get put on this. If we got a national monument to go on the upper and lower Dolores, it wouldn't be changing the flow of the McPhee Dam. It wouldn't be changing the priority that this landscape gets of water coming from the McPhee Dam, which in itself is a very complicated issue. A lot of that water, yes, a lot of it is going to large-scale agriculture. There is also a huge promised allotment that is supposed to be going to the Ute Mountain Ute tribe and their efforts to have clean drinking water and agricultural efforts. Are they really getting that allotted amount of water? Not always, but it's not as easy as just, if we took out the dam, everything would be okay. That would put a lot of communities in jeopardy. So it's a very complicated issue. And that's why for myself and my organizing efforts, I've really been just trying to encourage people to find beauty and find positivity and find potential and opportunity in the Canyon Country and really focus on the Canyon Country. So.
And the other negative, and again, this is not my personal opinion, but just other things that people say or other concerns that they express when they hear about designating an area as a monument or a national park or something like that is like, there's going to be tons of tourists, they're going to overrun the place, and it's just going to become another Moab, like everything that I hear is like, it's just going to be another Moab. So how do you, are you concerned about that? And then how do you counter that kind of objection?
Yeah. So I'm very happy you brought this up because it's one of my favorite things to talk about with people when they bring it up to me. I want to first say that I completely understand that there are a lot of landscapes across the U.S. in Moab. Even here in Colorado, if we look at Hanging Lake, if we look at Maroon Bells, when I was in college and I was studying environmental conservation, we would refer to this as an area being loved to death and that they're overrun with people. And a lot of people are choosing to make decisions in recreation on that landscape that are not beneficial to the integrity of the landscape or future people wanting to get out and enjoy it. This might be my own just blind optimism into the future, but I strongly believe that when you have a landscape like this, and if we got a national monument designated, let's just say it happened tomorrow, there would be a lot more resources available to create better, more effective interpretation in the area that would encourage safe recreation and recreation for the purpose of conservation. And I encourage anybody listening to this to, instead of thinking that human impact on a landscape is initially going to be bad and that it is in opposition to environmental protection and to landscape conservation, let's think of it as an influencing factor to conservation. Humans belong in nature, nature belongs in us, and if we look at recreation and human impact on these landscapes as something that can be used to benefit conservation, and I don't mean that it's always going to benefit, but at least that it's an influencing factor and not an opposing factor, I think that could really shift conversations around how we try to guide recreation in a way that it does reach that goal. A lot of my background, in my professional background, is in environmental education. And we, a lot of times, focus on, instead of if we see somebody not picking up after their dog, if we see somebody with a motorized vehicle in a natural area, instead of just saying, I'm going to call the ranger on you, you're going to get a fine and get in trouble, I'm going to go up and say, hey, it seems like you're really enjoying what you're doing, but did you know that, this is how dog poop being left out could affect the landscape? And if you're coming back here next week, like how often do you come out here? If you come back here, do you want to see that same pile of poop here or a different pile of poop? And if your friends are coming out here with you, do you think they're going to want to see that? And I try to encourage people to gain a sense of personal responsibility. And it doesn't always work out. And I understand that. But I really believe heavily in the power of personal responsibility when it comes to sustainable recreation.
And I can see how that approach and that attitude would still have a lot more success than just yelling at somebody, making them feel defensive and angry, and like just that seems like it would actually get through to more people. Like you're not going to get through to everybody, but more people than the other.
And I think the same goes for the Dolores. It makes me really sad actually when I hear people say, oh, but we don't want that area to be taken away from us. Like that's our special. I hear a lot of recreators or just users of the Dolores say, oh, but that's like my playground, you know, where they kind of see it as though they're like, this is a area that not that many people know of and we want to keep it that way. You know, what are your kids going to say to that? I mean, like maybe your children, you'll be able to show them cool places, but what about their friends? What about their future classmates? You know, don't you want them to be able to get out there too? And that's what I like to bring up to people is, you know, the more people that we can get out on a landscape to recreate sustainably and responsibly, and again, a national monument designation would be able to get more resources into the area to be able to do that better and guide that better. I think that's the best future we could possibly want. And so that these areas don't just get ignored and then engulfed in ulterior uses like oil and gas drilling because nobody's out there and nobody sees it happening.
Like share your toys, right?
Yeah.
So how can people get involved if they want to help?
Yes, so we do have a public petition that we have available. You can find it at the official protectthedolores.com.
Okay.
It's a very easy, just online petition. You can also put a little blurb about why you love the Dolores and public lands in general. That's a great first step. A big part of us being able to succeed in this work is getting enough people publicly voicing their support. And that's a hard thing to do for a lot of people. I understand that. And so that's a really great first step. For anybody that wants to go beyond that, we are always looking for people who are open to and excited to write letters to the editor, to local newspapers like the Daily Sentinel, or opinion editorials. Especially when it comes to LTEs or letters to the editor, we have drafted ones that we can give you, and that you can change up the way that you want it to reflect your voice. And that's, of course, just if you don't think you have the time to write one. We make it super easy, just give you the link that you can submit it to. And that is incredibly helpful because that's showing a grass tops section of our community, which is local news and local, communications like that, showing them that people want this to happen. So that's a incredibly beneficial way that people can help out. You can reach out to me and I can get you set up with that. And if you want to take the time on your own, write a letter to Senator Bennett or Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Bennett especially is very, very interested in this work. We recently did get him out on the landscape in a field trip, and he was excited to publicly state that he wanted permanent protections on the Dolores. And so I think writing to him or to Hickenlooper, I was talking about some of these 5th grade students that I worked with a couple months ago. I believe they're writing a letter to Biden to ask for these permanent protections, which I think is incredibly special. So those are ways. And then, if you sign up for like the Colorado Wildlands Project mailing list, we don't send out a lot, but we do send out invitations to any Dolores related events that are going on. We try to be involved in every one that's going on within anywhere near the Grand Valley. We can help you get there. So, attending those events is a huge way to support us. Soon, and I'm very happy to actually talk about this kind of to the public now, we are working with a local winery here in Palisade called Sauvage Spectrum to get a custom wine label for the Dolores put on some bottles. And so once that comes out, purchasing those, 10% of the profits are going to be going to the Wildlands Project directly. That benefits our work into the future. And, if there's ways that you think you can support us in a way that I haven't mentioned, again, reach out to me. I'll stay in contact. You can call me, you can email me. I love to talk with people in our community. I would love to be getting some new pictures from people of the Dolores that we can post on our social media, that we can post on our website, that we can make flyers out of. Obviously, we'll credit anybody who sends them to us, but I would love to have those. Or if you have a unique perspective on the landscape, we're always looking for speakers at different events. You can have the chance to speak at some sort of like a storytelling event about your unique experiences on the landscape. So there's a lot of different ways that you can help.
So how can people reach you? What's your...
I'll
put the link in there in like the notes.
Yeah, so you can email me, bella@cowildlands.com. I'm not going to put my phone number.
Just put your email there.
And also, just if you look up the Colorado Wildlands Project website, again, we're a very small group of people. You'll pretty quickly find me in the staff page, and you can email me through there as well.
All right. Well, it's awesome to talk to you. I can tell that you are just so passionate about this.
I am.
And you can tell it really inspires you. And
it does. Something that I think inspires me, that I've gained inspiration for the most since getting this job and being in this landscape, is looking at the issues of access in the Dolores, because it just made me really sad to see so many people feeling like they couldn't really get out onto the landscape because they weren't able to raft, they weren't able to boat or spend multiple days out on the landscape camping. I mean, if you can camp out there, oh my God, the stars will blow your mind. But not everybody has that option. Not everybody has that ability to access the area in that way. I've never boated the Dolores, and sometimes people are a little shocked by that. I work in this coalition, and I have never had the opportunity to be able to afford or have the gear to boat the Dolores. And I love the area. I've spent days and days out there, but it's just been through driving around it, hiking it, seeing the incredible geology of the area, the plants and the wildlife of the area, seeing some of the very unique ecosystems out there. If you all want to look up a really cool thing, look up the Unaweep Seep. So in Unaweep Canyon, there is a very unique ecosystem called the Seep, where it's basically a riparian ecosystem on the side of a hill.
Cool.
Because of water that's seeping out of the mountain. It's beautiful. Go find those areas, and I think that's where my passion really comes from, is I want people to know that even if getting a national monument out there takes a long time, even if it doesn't happen, we have our own slice of Utah, super close to us, right there, and then we can be supporting local Colorado economies by going to the general store in Gateway. And I just hope that any of you out there choose to take a day trip out there. Yeah.
Perfect fall drive, winter drive,
Yes.
anytime drive. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
great to talk to you. I can't wait to go back now.
Yeah.
And we can even go back and just visit again. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
When we moved to Palisade, one of the first things I did was pore over the maps of the surrounding area, taking in all the nearby possible adventures. The Dolores, squiggling through a section of land south of Gateway, tucked back behind the LaSalles, immediately caught my attention. Soon after, on a weekend adventure, Paul and I headed that way via Unaweep Canyon, through Gateway, and what my friend Lisa Marie laughed at me for calling Naturita, on our way to some of our favorite mountain biking trails in Norwood. You know when you think an area is going to be great, but then it's so much more. Like, how are people not just constantly gushing about this place? Go check it out. Then sign that petition to make the area a national monument. There's a link to it in the show notes. Write a letter to the president with your kids, with your friends. Wouldn't it be cool to help make something big happen in our lifetimes? Thanks for listening. With love, from Palisade. Oh, the sun is shining bright in your eyes. You want me to close that blind?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.
Just realizing this is the time of day when it just
Yeah.
filters right